For the last year, my husband Bryce has been eating a diet consisting of tons of grass-finished red meat, pasture-raised chicken, pork, turkey, organ meats like liver and heart, raw dairy, including 3 to 4 cups of milk a day, a daily cup of yogurt, an ounce of cheese, wild-caught fish like salmon and sardines, wild-caught seafood, including oysters and shrimp, 1 tablespoon raw honey in his coffee, and 3 servings of fruit a day. What's super interesting is Bryce and I wake up at the same time each day, eat our meals at the same time, work out together at the same time, go to bed at the same time, and we do eat very similarly, and our blood work results were very similar. However, at the time when I got my blood work done and when Bryce had his labs done, he was eating about 2 to 3 times as many carbohydrates than me. He was having about 120 to 150 grams of carbs a day for this last year, and contrary to what many people might think, there were several blood markers where Bryce's were better than mine, including his hormonal panel, vitamin D levels, white blood cell count, and his insulin. And meanwhile, my cardiac health was a little bit better than his. I will link my blood work as someone who at that time had been eating an animal-based diet for 3 years, but a lower carb version, so less than 60 grams of carbs a day, kind of animal-based diet. That blood work review I will leave in the description. Now granted, after I got my labs done and after Bryce got his blood work done, we're making some adjustments with how we eat, as this whole time we've not been trying to eat any particular diet. We're not trying to eat carnivore, we're not trying to be animal-based, we're trying to be healthy. And if our blood work gives little red flags or signals to change, we're going to make adjustments. While I personally like peeping and creeping on other people's blood work, and I hope you find value in seeing Bryce's results, I can't emphasize enough to get your own labs done.
Do you want to just tell everyone why you wanted to do this maybe and what your diet's like?
Yeah, so it's just being proactive. There was no alarming reason why I did it. I'm just trying to be as aware as I can and be eating the best food that's the best for like my genetics and my results for blood work. So it's just something that I was just curious about more than anything. And for me, for eating, I kind of eat animal-based, but I do have a little bit more carbs than most because we work out 4 times a week pretty vigorously. We take walks every day, walk for 45 minutes to an hour. And we started doing some HIIT training on even the days off. So we're kind of doing a lot of activity, and the carbs have been very beneficial for me for my energy and then my goals for building muscle and whatnot. So I eat a little bit more carbs than most, but predominantly I eat a lot of red meats, a lot of animal meats in general, and we rotate them. And I have a lot of dairy in my diet, so I have 4 cups of milk a day and some yogurt and some cheese, 2 to 3 servings of fruit a day. That's generally where my carbs come from, is some fruit, and then a lot of, from the milk.
I'd say 3 meals a day, a milk meal with protein powder, just because I think one of the reasons is because the protein powder tastes good, but then also because he's actually trying to keep his iron levels a little bit lower, and we might even see some things with that here. And then with his lunch, any kind of meat, maybe some cheese, and then for dinner, a different kind of meat. So we do rotate chicken, oysters, salmon, sardines, turkey, not that many eggs, actually.
I used to eat a lot more eggs in the past, and for some reason, something happened where, I don't know, one day I kind of got a little sick. I think it was from the eggs, and then literally after that period, I was completely not able to tolerate any eggs. At one point, I was eating 8 whole eggs a day, 8 to 10 whole eggs a day. And then it was if I had 1 egg, it was just very noticeable. Let's put it that way. As soon as I took it out, I was a lot better. So I haven't tried putting eggs back in, and I'm not sure exactly why that happened. But yeah, I used to eat a lot.
Eggs are a really common food intolerance, actually. I see it a ton in people. The protein structure ends up breaking down so finely in most people that even if you have mild leaky gut, and leaky gut can arise from many things. It's not just, a bad diet per se, but even excess stress can put extra damage on the gut. And so even if there's a little tiny bit of leaky gut, those tiny little egg proteins can make their way through. Your body can mount a response to it. And it should heal over time. And ultimately, giving it enough of a break, allowing that gut to heal, you should be able to get that ability back pretty simply.
I would like to, because I really enjoyed eggs before, and I know that the choline and everything's really good for the liver and whatnot, and that's one of the things I'm sure we're going to talk about is my liver has a little bit elevated on the liver enzyme, so it was actually a lot lower on past blood work when I was eating eggs, so I'm kind of wondering also if that partly was helping my liver. So for coffee, I'll have 1 cup of coffee on my non-workout days, and then when we do work out, I don't have any coffee. I just have pre-workout before the gym. So it's like one serving of caffeine every single day.
Not excessive.
No.
Fair enough. All right. Well, we'll start with the first page, which is the anemia and nutrition status. So first thing that you're going to see up here, your ferritin levels, which is your storage form of iron, were super elevated. 400 is obviously the upper range. You were at 422, but even if we're talking about optimal, usually for guys, it's below 100. And excess ferritin is going to cause higher oxidative stress in the body, which can make you more predisposed to having things like insulin resistance, cardiovascular issues, cardiovascular inflammation, and of course, liver issues, because a lot of the ferritin does get stored in the liver.
With what you're seeing with the 422, would you kind of think that that might be causing maybe some form of hemochromatosis with the liver, or would you say that that's not something to worry about, or like what's your interpretation of that?
There's a couple things to look at this. So obviously, anytime we're eating any iron containing foods, so muscle meat from animals, we're going to be taking in more iron and storing it as ferritin. There is the possibility of what's called hereditary hemochromatosis. I don't know if I would hang my hat on that for you just yet, because there is another factor that goes into this too. And spoiler alert, it's going to be one of the things in the last pages, but you were really copper deficient. Yeah. Copper deficiency will have your body sequester more iron as ferritin. So there's kind of this whole kind of spectrum of things happening right now. And if I had to hang my hat on what the root cause is, it would be your copper is really low, which is causing your body to store the ferritin, despite you drinking a ton of raw milk, which actually is one of the things that could potentially chelate that excess iron. And it's not to say that women can't have hemochromatosis. It's just that it doesn't present as strongly in women, because women bleed every month when they have their menstrual cycles. Sure. So they're usually always doing that bloodletting, so to speak. And if it does hit women, oftentimes it is postmenopausal when they stop bleeding and all those stores really do start to build up, especially in the absence of their protective hormones like estrogen. So possible that it's there. I would still start with the copper, though, given the whole picture of everything we're seeing. Down in your nutrition section, overall, you're doing really good. If I'm going to have to be picky, I'm going to pick on the folate. And the reason that I'm going to be picky on this is because when we take a look at the cardiovascular panel, there was a slight elevation in your homocysteine, which could be painting a picture of the MTHFR defect. Have you heard of that guy before?
Yes, I have.
So that one also has a propensity to store more ferritin. If that isn't something that you have tested before, it's usually a pretty easy test to do. I know a lot of labs will run it for anywhere between like $60 to $100 as a standalone test. I would say you only have to run it one time, because your genes are never going to change, and then you'll know for sure. But in the general, like what you're doing in your lifestyle is picking up the slack if you do have it.
Okay. No, that's a good suggestion. That would be nice to know, for sure.
And those vitamin D levels, I was like, oh man, you crushed me. That's double my vitamin D. We're doing this, eating very similarly.
Yeah.
It is solid vitamin D level. Like it's enviable for most people. The one caveat that I would have is that vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. So there too much could be too much. And if you do usually go over that higher end of the reference range, so over that 108, if you start getting into the 110s, 150s, I've seen some really high ones, you actually risk kidney issues and kidney damage with that. So I always tell people, like, take just enough. And most people will need between about 4,000 and 5,000 IU per day for general health. So if somebody's taking 10,000, that's a great loading dose for a short period of time, but you'll want to monitor your levels and get yourself back to a maintenance dose when it seems reasonable. And I usually like most of my people to sit at least above 50 with their vitamin D, but of course not going outside that reference range. So you're sitting beautifully there, doing great with the vitamin D, which I think is what's having the most positive effect on your hormones, which we're going to get to as well. And then of course your vitamin B12 is nice and high too. And that's fine to be high. You're not going to run into but you shouldn't run into a lot of issues with consistently high B vitamin levels, as long as they're staying in relative balance to each other, because your body will just eliminate whatever it doesn't need. Those are water soluble. All right, down to the cardiac health panel. So this is where we can have some fun. Of course, everybody likes to see, oh my gosh, high cholesterol, likes to freak out about high cholesterol. It's just a value. It doesn't tell us what the cholesterol is doing. It doesn't tell us if you have heart disease. It doesn't tell us if you have any plaques. It doesn't even tell us if you have any inflammation. This is why we run all these expanded factors beyond just the cholesterol itself. Even so, on your cholesterol panel, like, this is brag worthy, okay? Your HDL was at 93. This is our quote unquote good cholesterol. And your triglycerides were only at 57. So despite you eating carbs, as some people might want to say is terrible for us, right? Normally, we want the HDL and the triglycerides to be about a 1-to-1. You're almost a 2-to-1.
Good.
Very impressive. I would brag about like this is really, really wonderful. So this, even by itself, like even if we didn't do any of these expanded markers, I would be very hesitant to assume that there was any cardiovascular damage happening at all. That being said, we get into something called our apolipoproteins. So when we're looking at something like ApoB, everybody's quick to jump to the fact that this is bad. Like if ApoB is elevated, it's absolutely bad. It is even more accurate than LDL as far as how bad it is. But we jump down into his inflammation section. And we see here that minus the homocysteine, which we have an explanation for that with the possible MTHFR gene and just your folate possibly not being enough. Your other cardiac factors, basically non-existent. There is zero cardiac inflammation or damage happening in your system. So how bad is ApoB going to be for you? I would wager almost none. And if you want to even take it one step further and get something done like a cardiac stress test, a coronary artery calcium scan, I would be very, very shocked to see if there was anything wrong at all, or if you had any blockages. If you didn't want to do something like the calcium scan, which is technically radiation, they do have ultrasounds that you can get where they ultrasound the valves and see if there is any plaques or blockages. Maybe if your MPO, your myeloperoxidase, would have been even above 500, like even close to this threshold, I would say, maybe, because this is a marker of kind of active cardiac damage. Mm-hmm. It's fine. Your oxidative LDL, which is your LDL actually in an oxidative state, totally fine. Your hsCRP, which is a marker of your generalized body-wide inflammation, it's also cardiac specific, non-existent. When it says less than 2 like that, it pretty much means they couldn't detect it at all. And then, of course, the PLAC, also known as PLA2, super low. So again, no other cardiac damage from that perspective as well. And we can see it too under these other markers as well, like the small density LDL, again, another form of LDL that's going to be quote unquote bad. And then, of course, the Lp(a). People like to freak out about that one. Yours, again, basically non-existent. So your heart is doing wonderful, your whole cardiovascular system in general. Under the diabetes check, so A1C, nice and low. Again, I don't think that the carbs are affecting you in any negative way. I think this is a conversation that does have some nuance to it, because of course there are some people that can't tolerate them. But ultimately, the body has 2 ways to fuel itself. You can either fuel yourself through glucose or you can fuel yourself through fat. And what this looks like is that you really do have great metabolic flexibility. Like your insulin was low when it needs to be low, your A1C is perfect, and you see, and your triglycerides were also super, super low. So keep doing what you're doing with that, because your metabolism
better than mine.
Yeah, that's a surprise.
And it's so hard to compare apples to oranges on labs, especially from male to female. When it comes to labs, it's a matter of watching your own specific trends over time and correlating them to, am I reaching my goals and am I feeling my best, and optimizing from there. So it seems like he's doing pretty phenomenal. And yeah, don't compare. Down under the liver and kidney function. So this is where you saw some stuff kind of pop up. Overall, your electrolytes were fine. Your blood glucose was fine. Your BUN was high. I see a high BUN in carnivores or animal-based people pretty much all the time. And it's because BUN stands for blood urea nitrogen, and nitrogen is a waste byproduct breakdown of the process of protein. So normal to have that elevated. When your creatinine was slightly high, which could and usually could be an indication of some just mild dehydration. I'm not sure how much, I think you were drinking a good amount of water when I saw it on your thing, but if you had this blood draw done fasting, sometimes that can just be an indicator too, not necessarily a big deal. But that even being said, your EGFR was at 72. Normally, a guy like your age and young, I would like to see at least over 80. Doesn't mean that your kidneys are in bad shape. And if you are drinking a lot of water, it becomes the question of, well, what's the quality of the water? Are you using electrolytes, or is it distilled or reverse osmosis, or something that's more devoid of minerals, so you aren't actually holding that hydration intracellularly? But then I've also had the flip side too, where people have been taking too many electrolytes and they make themselves dehydrated that way. So I know, I might sound like a broken record, but it really is about the balance of all the things.
I do feel like I drink a lot of water. I would guess about 100 ounces a day. And we use a 0 water filter, so it makes everything 0, but then I do add trace minerals into it to reconstitute the water, and we do have element as well. So I'm trying to always find like a balance of just having clean water, but also putting in the things that I need to put in. And I've noticed if I put too many of the trace minerals in, I do feel like I'm not as hydrated. So it's like, I don't know if I should be drinking more water or how to balance it more, or if that's...
It's so tricky. And especially if you're active, like you're going to run through more electrolytes than the average person, just because of all the processes you're putting your body through. You're losing a lot of it through like the breathing that you're doing just from doing heavy exercise. If you're sweating a lot, if you're doing a sauna, your needs become a little bit more than the average person. And so maybe one serving a day is enough for you. Like I'll give myself as an example. I'm nursing a 5-month-old right now. I drink at least 120 ounces of water a day, and each 120 ounces has a full serving of electrolytes in it. And I don't pee any more than normal. But I'm making milk, and the electrolyte gradient from, your blood into the breast milk, that readily pushes the electrolytes through and those minerals through so that the baby can get those, right? Because that's what the baby needs to grow. And so I have to work extra hard to do that. And it's a similar sort of load when you're pushing yourself really heavy in the gym, like your needs just go up.
This is something I always think about, and I'm wondering what's your opinion on it. So when we eat food, a lot of times I'll avoid drinking liquid about 30 minutes or more before, and then I wait 30 minutes to an hour after, especially if it's a meal with a lot of fat in it. I guess, what's your opinion on drinking liquids with meals? Do you think it matters at all? Does it help digestion? Should I be doing that? Is that something that I should be adding in? And does it sound like I needed to be drinking more than 100 ounces of water a day? Because we, like you just said, when we work out, we do the sauna every time. So 4 times a week, we do sauna for 15 minutes. And trust me, when I'm in there, I drink a lot of water. I drink probably 30 ounces of water at the gym. Do you think I have an opportunity to change some of that stuff?
Yeah. So I get what you're saying with the meal timing and the water. And I feel like this was made very popular through the socials that, you're going to dilute your enzymes if you consume a lot of water. The pH of our stomach and our stomach acid is the first stop. The algorithmic rating of a pH system isn't going to be affected in any way close to what people might lead you to believe with the amount of water volume you could hold as far as like dilution goes, so to speak. Does that make sense initially, right? So when food gets broken down, we have our whole digestive tract set up the way it is for a reason, right? We're supposed to chew our food first, get some of the carbs breaking down first with the enzymes in our mouth, make its way down to our stomach, where a lot of that stomach acid starts cleaving a lot of those big bonds, right? And that is going to happen even if there's water in there. And the water can still go through, right? It can still pass. So I am not of the school of thought that you have to avoid any liquids with your meals. And in fact, if you watch children are so intuitive. They will drink a lot of volume with their meals. They will eat, they'll be thirsty, they will drink, and they're not falling apart at the seams, right? They're not paying attention to that. You're likely not going to have a problem breaking down your food. And if you are feeling thirsty, it's probably for a reason. As far as increasing your own water intake, I think this is where the experimentation is going to have to come in. If you're watching your urine output, going by how you feel, is your skin dry? Can you scratch your skin and some skin flakes off? If that's an indication that you may be dehydrated as well. You feel just more like tightness in your joints or having a harder time recovering from the gym, that can be dehydration too. And of course, just feeling thirsty. That would be a place there. Start, experiments, see what electrolytes really work for you. And then we went down into the liver enzymes. So your ALT, AST, and then your alkaline phosphatase. Those are the 3 liver enzymes that we generally check on here. If I had to hang my hat on, because there's such a small elevation, 2 things. One, I think the ferritin is stressing out your liver. And then, of course, we can also have a mild elevation in liver enzymes just with dehydration. It does happen. So we're going to talk, of course, we talked about the ferritin a little bit, but then once we get into the micronutrients, we'll talk about the copper too. You have questions on this section?
No, I would say that I got my blood work done 3 years before this, and they were both in the low 20s, ALT and AST. So, I mean, that's just a 3-year change, but like you're saying, I would just say the same things that you're talking about. The ferritin was one of the things I was thinking might be taxing the liver, and the water is just such a nuanced thing because it's one of those things I feel like I really pay attention to, but I definitely don't feel like I'm hydrated the right way still. I guess one of the things I'm wondering is what kind of water filter, what kind of water do you consume?
What do
We
you
have
think
a
is
reverse
best?
osmosis system, and like I said, I'm pretty diligent about the both minerals and electrolytes. So all electrolytes are minerals, but not all minerals are electrolytes. So I will do my electrolyte replacements in my drinks, and then I will take my oysters as a mineral supplement because they're bioavailable. They have pretty much all of them in trace amounts because they come from the ocean. And I find that keeps me pretty squared away. I actually just ran my labs and things were looking pretty good.
Nice.
Cool. You can get 8 free electrolyte packets from the brand Element with any order by using the link in the description. This is the brand of electrolytes we've been using for several years that has no sugar or artificial ingredients in it that we just pour into our water, milk, or coffee each day, and it gives us more sodium, magnesium, and potassium. They also taste really great, and they give us these essential minerals we need to help stay hydrated, to prevent heart palpitations, muscle cramping, eye twitching, poor sleep, low energy, fatigue. Again, we personally filter out our water, and then we remineralize our water with the electrolytes. You can get those 8 additional free packets of all of Element's different flavors with any order by going to the link in the description or by going to the URL drinkelement.com/LillieKane.
Thyroid panel. So short version, your thyroid's doing just okay. This is the other reason why I was kind of curious about the MTHFR, because sometimes people with the MTHFR not just have a propensity for thyroid issues, but may have a propensity for something called Hashimoto's. And your anti-TPO antibodies is something that would lead us to believe that there might be Hashimoto's happening. Now, even though your levels aren't above the 34, which is the reference range, most of the time, if somebody is not Hashimoto's at all, they end up being non-detectable. So there'll be like a little, the less than sign with a 9 beside it or something. So what happened here is that they did detect some, but it's not over. Like it's not over the levels. This is something that I would just pay attention to. Hashimoto's symptoms are going to be similar to low thyroid symptoms. And usually there is some leaky gut kind of attached to this as well. But constipation, cold extremities, hair loss, thinning hair, even around the eyebrows, also dry skin, brittle nails, those are going to be the most common things that we see with a Hashimoto's picture or even a suboptimal thyroid. Now, like I said, your thyroid was like just okay. Your TSH was good. So this is the thyroid stimulating hormone. It's a signal that comes from the pituitary and goes to the thyroid gland and says, hey, go ahead and release thyroid hormone. And then thyroid hormone gets released as T4. Your T4 is doing great. It's actually perfect levels. I like it at 1.3 or above, 1.2, 1.3 or above. And then it gets converted into T3. And to do that conversion, you need zinc, selenium, iodine, B vitamins. Spoiler alert, your selenium was low. So this conversion may not be happening as readily or as optimally. And I usually like to see your T3 around 3.9 to 4.2. Little bit of optimization could happen here, especially if you are experiencing any of those low thyroid symptoms. If you're not perfect, but this is something that I would pay attention to as well. And again, still might be worth getting that genetic test done. Under your hormones, though, there's a lot of good stuff here. Your testosterone was amazing. 879 for a guy, not your age. I should say, I don't say that bad or anything like that, but I see a lot of men frequently in their 30s who don't take care of themselves and their levels may be in the 300s, 400s. And it just kind of sucks, because it's a long way to kind of claw yourself back from that naturally, especially because in your 30s, we generally still want to preserve the ability to have kids, or at least a lot of guys do. And if you start testosterone replacement that early, you can potentially affect your sperm count quality and could potentially lead to a degree of sterilization. So you're all good on those levels, which is wonderful. Your estradiol, which is your estrogen, on the lower end of the reference range, which is good. We still want some for guys. We just don't want too much of it. As far as your balance goes, you're beautiful on that. Your DHEA was fine, middle of the road. This is a precursor hormone towards your testosterone, so you're doing great there. Your LH and your FSH are signaling hormones, basically telling your body to release these sex hormones, and we want those on the lower end of the range, which you're good at. Now, your SHBG, or your sex hormone binding globulin, a little bit high. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just is. Sex hormone binding globulin is basically the bus that drives testosterone around in your system. If there's too many buses, that means there's less free testosterone that can go around and go to work. So you'll see your total levels were 879, but your free was only about 11. And normally I like to see it above 20. It's because some of it's being bound up by the sex hormone binding globulin. A couple of things that can impact this. Alcohol consumption can make this go up. I know you probably don't do that. Not resist training can make this go up, and then not eating enough protein. You're doing all the right things. You're doing all the right things already, and this can be frustrating, right? So one of the other things that can affect this, and that I've seen, and I don't know why this is a correlation, but I've seen this correlate in people with the MTHFR. So I would still urge you, like, get that checked out. Again, I don't know why it does this. It's just a pattern that I have seen over and over again, and it doesn't, it's just bound up a little bit. You probably still feel great. You're probably still getting really great benefits from that. And like if you Google like, oh, how to reduce sex hormone binding globulin, like you'll see herbs and stuff like that. I've never seen anything worth writing home about, but it's certainly not going to hurt you to give it a try for a month or two, just to, see what else is out there. Your progesterone levels were fine. And then your cortisol levels were they were higher than I'd like to see them. If you find that you are generally a more high stress person, then yes, this is what's showing up for you. I would say that if the cortisol or the stress is an issue, it's just something that you might want to pay attention to. It could just be situational, but that might be what could be causing any leaky gut issues and those antibodies going up slightly.
So we had similar results in a lot of different ways. My liver enzymes were a little bit elevated. My cortisol was a little bit elevated. My free T3 was a little bit low. I was thinking like maybe there was something that we were eating other than just like, oh, we're stressed people. And it was like maybe we're having too much protein, or there was something else that we could be eating similarly that would be, but we also live the same life, so we could have stress just from our life.
The other thing that might be worth looking at is environmental exposures. So if both couples and both people in a couple that live together have similar outcomes, especially if there is a liver involvement, I've seen mold in a house spit out results like this. I know you guys just moved though, so it's hard to say because Lily's was in the other house, yours is in, I guess, from this house. But even with that, there could just be like shared things that you guys have. Like, are you using polyester sheets, or do you have a cooking pan that maybe have a toxic coating on it, or on and on, right? Like there's so many other potentials looped in with that. And there is a toxicity test that we run, and it's through urine. And it tests for all the mold and mycotoxins, heavy metals, as well as environmental toxins like BPA, glyphosate, all the plastics that you're exposed to, various other pesticides that might be in, foods, everything. So if these things don't improve, like say you repeat this in 6 months, a year, and there's other stuff happening, or maybe you start having other symptoms, might be worth looking into, okay, was there maybe an exposure and it has nothing to do with our diet? CBC, completely fine. No signs of like any infections or anything crazy like a leukemia or anything like that, which was good. Under your other markers, uric acid was totally fine. This would indicate gout if it was elevated. Magnesium levels were good. I know you're taking magnesium. Your iodine is a little bit on the lower end. So this could also be thyroid supportive for you if you wanted to start some iodine. You can get it, iodine as far as from various seafood items if you like eating seafood. If you are going to start taking iodine, I always advise people like low and slow, because sometimes people can have pretty strong reactions to it.
I have Lugel's iodine because I thought about supplementing a little bit with that in the past, and even with one drop, a single drop, it was didn't make me feel good.
Yeah.
So I stopped immediately, but at the same time, I'm kind of on the lower end now that I see this, and it makes me wonder, is that something I should be messing with at all again? Because I still have it, obviously, but I was just like, I'm not feeling good with this, so,
This is one of the reasons, why I like people starting low and slow, because you can feel worse. And one of the reasons, and this is like a chemistry lesson, if you guys can picture like the periodic table, and in the one line of the periodic table, we had what are called like, oh gosh, I'm going to blank on it, but it's like the fluorine, the chlorine, the bromine, all the things that end in INE or IDE. They're all very closely related to each other, and they can all bind up to receptor sites that iodine should preferentially be binding at. So if you've ever drinking tap water, had a fluoride treatment, for example, or have consumed any packaged good that was preserved with bromine or bromide, or you swam in a pool that had chlorine in it, or your water from your shower has chlorine in it, these molecules are going to preferentially bind to those iodine receptors. And when you start actually adding iodine back in, especially if you're in a deficient state, and it kicks those molecules out into circulation, you're going to feel them. You're going to have to detox them.
Mhm.
So low and slow for that type of detox, if that is what's happening. And again, most of us likely have something like that because these things are ubiquitous and we do feel them, have them in our environment. So not to say don't do it, because you could definitely benefit from it, but yeah, low and slow and just be ready for the detox.
So you're under the assumption that if I did start to try to do that again, that over time that feeling would go away and I would actually feel better, and it would be an improvement. It would help my thyroid as well.
100%. Yep. Under your micronutrients. So zinc, totally fine, above normal. I know your supplement, you had a zinc supplement as far as I remember. And then
it's in the pre-workout. It's 10 milligrams in the pre-workout. So I have it 4 times a week for 4 workouts. But I feel like, with the amount of meat and stuff we eat, I feel like I eat so much zinc and definitely a lot of selenium, even though I'm low. And even for the copper, we eat oysters like every week, and we have liver all the time, and we even have liver capsules every day. Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's just like, I feel like I'm eating a lot of these.
I know,
things
I was like,
already.
I was not deficient in selenium, but I was on the lower end of selenium, and it's like, if we're lower deficient in selenium, I feel bad for everybody else because we are eating like a pure selenium diet, I swear.
Yeah. So I mean, ever since this, I went and I bought Brazil nuts, and I'm eating 2 Brazil nuts a day now on top of everything else. So I'm like, this is ridiculous. How am I low in selenium?
Brazil nuts, they theoretically are supposed to have a high amount of selenium in them. But that's really dependent on if they are grown in soils that have really good amounts of selenium in it. So still not necessarily a guarantee. But yes, you're right. The copper was low, and it put your copper to zinc ratio really off. And so even though, the copper itself wasn't quote unquote deficient, like you're right on the border, it looks deficient to your body, which is probably why you are sequestering or storing all that excess iron. And when it's low like this, usually I like to try to do at least like supplement solely copper. So you're at least just loading that guy up and not also continuing to add the additional things, because if you're still adding the other stuff, you might still be keeping that ratio low. And then same with the selenium. Pork is a great source of selenium. And then of course, seafood is going to be a great source of selenium too. But yeah, getting both of those levels up, I think is going to be really beneficial.
So your suggestion is to actually supplement for the copper. And
with an active form. Yeah.
What would you suggest? What supplement?
A copper bisglycinate. And normally I don't ever have people take minerals long term permanently, because I ultimately do want you to get them from food, but sometimes we just want to correct things as quickly as we can. And usually what I'll have people do is finish 1 bottle, sometimes 2, depending on their state, before we retest and really look at it and see, okay, how much did we change this? Do we need to do another one? Because we don't want to do the flip side and put you into a copper toxicity, right? Like it's, again, balance. And the same with the selenium. There's a couple different seleniums. The selenomethionine tends to be the best absorbed and bioavailable for most people. Some people do well with a form of selenium called like selenoxyl, and it comes from a yeast extract. If people have like histamine issues, there's some other, sort of phenotypes that don't do well with that one. But the selenomethionine is usually pretty safe.
I hope you got value out of this video. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you're looking to talk more one-on-one about carnivore, animal-based, low-carb, keto, or how to structure your diet so you can get all the vitamins and minerals you need, then I do offer one-on-one coaching, and I'd love to help you on your health journey. There will be a link in the description to my coaching services. I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll see you in the next one.